Hello everyone, Michael the Librarian of Magic here, finding and cataloging the magical and pointing you to it. Today is October the 13th, and I have another villain drawing for you today. It's already getting to almost the middle of the month, and we just keep churning right along. But I've got a new one that I'm pretty happy with the drawing, excited to show you and talk about today. Fidget the Bat from 1986's The Great Mouse Detective. This is a pretty cool character. He's a sidekick to the main antagonist, Ratigan, the rat, and Fidget here, of course, is a bat. He's got some injuries. He's got some disabilities. He's got a peg leg. He's missing a foot or whatever on one side, and he has a one of his wings doesn't work quite right, so he can't quite fly either. But he's really cool design and just a fun sidekick character from a movie that I don't think gets a lot of love or recognition. It'd be worth doing a whole video someday just about The Great Mouse Detective, because it's a really interesting movie and really important in the history of Disney animation. But that's another video for another time. Today we're specifically talking about this character, Fidget the Bat. The character was designed by an animator named Glenn Keane, who basically came up with the character design, and then was also animated by Kathy Zielinski, Phil Young, and Matthew O'Callaghan, from what I could gather, principally. The design of it is very similar. He looks and in some ways sounds very similar to the Gremlins from the Joe Dante directed, Steven Spielberg produced movie Gremlins. There are some definite similarities there. So yeah, he's kind of got this like hissy growlness. He's got some pretty terrifying teeth. The ears and everything look a little bit similar to the Gremlins, but yeah, he's pretty cool. He basically does a lot of Ratigan's dirty work throughout the film, throughout the story, and towards the end of the movie, he kind of gets betrayed by Ratigan. Spoiler alert. There's this wonderful set piece in the end of the movie where they're having this showdown above the skyline of London, and the Ratigan and Fidget are escaping in this balloon. It's like a dirigible with the girl that they've kidnapped, and Fidget suggests that they should just toss the girl overboard to free up weight. Basically what he tells Ratigan is, we need to lighten the load in order to keep the balloon from falling, and Ratigan thinks that's a great idea, so he throws Fidget overboard instead. And Fidget can't fly because of his bum wing, so he falls into the Thames River. Apparently, he survives the fall, at least if you, believe the Disney Adventures magazines from the 90s. He's featured in several stories there, and actually is sort of a reformed character. He's not really an antagonist anymore. He helps Olivia, the girl from The Great Mouse Detective, solve mysteries and crimes or whatever. And so he's featured in several of those Disney adventure stories after having survived his fall into the Thames. So yeah, he's just kind of one of these characters that gets turned around after getting betrayed by his the main villain, which goes to show you that you can't trust bad guys, and Ratigan is most certainly one of the worst. And another thing worth talking about here with Fidget the Bat is that he was voiced by the great Candido, who was a really interesting talent who featured in a lot of Disney stuff and other famous stuff too. He's one of those guys that people might know without knowing that they know him. Candido was well known back in the golden age of Hollywood on radio and film. He had a 4-octave range, so in his singing and speaking voice, so he was able to do a lot of interesting things. If you want a good example of his range being demonstrated, there's a novelty song called One Meatball that you can find, if you search for it on Google or YouTube or whatever, you can find him performing it. And I would recommend that you do. It demonstrates what he was capable of with his range, and it's pretty incredible. It's very, very impressive, and it's a funny little novelty song too. So I would recommend that. One Meatball, Candido. Just search for that, and it'll turn up. He did a lot of other interesting roles because of his vocal abilities. He was an angry apple tree in The Wizard of Oz, the famous version of The Wizard of Oz. And his voice is very recognizable in that. It's just kind of like gravelly. If you're familiar or if you're a fan of these movies, you will recognize his voice. He was a skeleton in Abbott and Costello in the Foreign Legion. He voiced the bear, Gentle Ben, on TV's Gentle Ben. He did a lot of animal growls and bear voices and all of that kind of stuff because he was able to produce some pretty gravelly bass sounds. He was the voice of the Indian chief in Peter Pan, a role that has not really aged all that well. But he did voice that role, and also the chief in the Peter Pan's Flight ride at Disneyland. He was the voice of one of the goons in Sleeping Beauty, which I actually did make a Goons video in the last season of this series, and I did mention Candido in that, but he was the voice of this goon in particular from Sleeping Beauty, and did do also that voice in the walkthrough attraction at Sleeping Beauty's castle in Disneyland. And then also in Disneyland, he was the voice of, or vocalizing of Gus, the escaped prisoner in the Haunted Mansion ride, and various devils in Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. He provided all of those. Additionally, he was the voice of Captain Crocodile in Robin Hood, Disney's Robin Hood, Brutus and Nero in The Fox and the Hound, the bear in, Brutus and Nero in The Rescuers, and the bear in The Fox and the Hound. I got my movies mixed up there. So yeah, he was the American Crocodiles, Brutus and Nero in the Rescuers, and this antagonistic bear in The Fox and the Hound. He was really good at and he also provided many other bear growls and things like that for Disney over the years that he wasn't necessarily credited for. He was also did a bunch of additional voices and growls and animal sounds and things like that in an episode of Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color called Nature's Better Built Homes. He did a lot of various extra voices for that. Another thing I found, if you look at his filmography, he's credited or listed in the cast of the film Herbie Rides Again, but I could not find anywhere any information about what he actually did in that film. I'm assuming that he didn't appear on screen, or else that would have been easier to find out. I'm assuming he did sound effects or voices or stuff like that for the movie, but he is credited in the cast. If anybody knows anything about Candido's affiliation with that particular movie, Herbie Rides Again, I'd be interested to know what his involvement was on that picture. I couldn't find any information about that other than apparently he was involved. And then, of course, he did Fidget the Bat here, which was his sort of last notable role before he passed away. He passed away about 13 years after this movie came out, so he lived a good while longer, but he didn't really he kind of went into retirement and didn't really do a bunch of stuff after the fact. His sort of growly, hissy, guttural voice was actually sped up. All of his lines were sped up electronically for Fidget the Bat to raise it out of the basement a little bit, although he could get up there into a high note or high range if he needed to. But that's kind of what they did to make the effect of this character. So Candido, he's one of those people in the history of voicing animation in Walt Disney that it would be beneficial to be familiar with if you're a fan of this stuff like I am. He's just one of those guys who should I don't think he's officially a Disney legend, but he should be, considering his long-term involvement with the company and the parks and the films and everything like that. He's just one of those cool talents that is really fascinating to see him perform and do his thing. He was a very talented guy. So that's Fidget the Bat from the Great Mouse Detective, a cool character brought to life by Glenn Keane and his animation team and Candido. I hope that you enjoyed this drawing, and this was one that I was particularly proud of, so I think it turned out really well, and this is just a fun little side character that I like. So thanks as always for watching these. I hope that this was entertaining and informative, and I'll be back tomorrow with another one of these, and every day for the rest of October. Please join me then. Thanks for following along, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.